Okay, let's just get this out of the way. There is one indisputable reason to send humans to Mars, and that's because it would be awesome. And that's a completely sufficient reason. I mean, personally, I'm a fan of robots exploring space because they're so much cheaper and just so much better at space than people are. So we should just be able to do a lot more exploring with just robots. But, I mean, I'm not a grouch. If we collectively decide to send people to Mars, it would be truly amazing. Okay, but do we need to send people to Mars? Plenty of people have stressed the importance of populating Mars, from Stephen Hawking to Elon Musk to various books and TV shows, and even members of my own family. The idea is that if something should happen to Earth, the human race and its civilization would be lost forever. So having a second sustainable habitation for humans would safeguard against any number of catastrophes. As long as a small population exists somewhere off of Earth, then the human race could continue. And so this makes sense as far as it goes. And yet Mars, despite being the second best option in the solar system for habitation, is a seriously hostile place for us to try to live on. It is effectively just a barren rock in space. Anyone trying to live long-term on Mars would have to contend with very high radiation, an extremely thin atmosphere, not nearly enough water, and freezing temperatures. And even though Mars is the closest planet to Earth, it is extremely far away from us. There is a lot of talk of terraforming Mars. That is, to make Mars more like Earth, with the end goal of allowing humans to live comfortably on the Martian surface. The first idea is to melt the Martian polar caps, which could release a lot of gaseous carbon dioxide to start to rebuild the atmosphere and set up a greenhouse effect to warm the planet enough for liquid water. But there's simply not nearly enough carbon dioxide to begin to make the slightest impact to fill Mars's thin atmosphere. Right now, Mars's atmosphere is less than 1% of the atmosphere the Earth has. In other words, nearly none. Harnessing all the easily available CO2 could double that to, well, still nearly none. With massive industry working centuries, you could extract CO2 from the Martian surface, which might get you to 6% atmosphere, which is still not in the neighborhood of what you would need. And there are plenty other ideas. Crashing thousands of comets into Mars, restarting Mars's molten core with nukes, heating the planet with, well, nukes, and plenty more ideas, probably involving nukes. All of these are far beyond what we can do now. And even these impossible ideas don't really get you to a balanced ecosystem within the next 1,000 years. So let's put terraforming in the category of far off speculation. Of course, what we very realistically could do is build full cities under metal barriers that could contain self-sufficient ecosystems within them. We could grow plants to provide oxygen, nuclear power plants and solar panels to keep it warm, and thick steel shielding to keep us safe from radiation. There, done. This is all possible with today's technology. It would be extraordinarily difficult and expensive. Given the distance from Earth, it would be an engineering feat far beyond anything we've tried before. Now, much more feasible would be to set up a small research base on Mars for researchers and scientists, in the same way we currently have small bases in the Antarctic right now. But we haven't tried to set up cities in the Antarctic. And if we haven't done that, which would be far, far, far easier than setting up cities on Mars, what makes us think we would ever get into the business of Martian cities? So to answer this, let's go back to Earth. What are we worried about? Certainly the biggest threat the human race faces is complete environmental collapse to the point where the Earth can no longer support human life. This is a very reasonable concern. But note, there are no models of environmental collapse that would make the Earth anywhere close to as desolate as Mars is today. For all of our considerable destructive potential, we'd be unable to do that much damage to Earth even if we put our minds to it. We couldn't get close to how barren and starved for resources as Mars is right now. If you do want to save some small fraction of Earth's population, put your metal, self-contained cities on Earth instead. It would be far, far, far cheaper and easier to build. You could even use parts of the world no one wants, like the hottest desert, the middle of the Antarctic, under the water, anywhere on Earth would be orders and orders of magnitude cheaper and easier to build than a Mars colony and would give you the same ability to safeguard a small but sustainable group of people. Or, if that's not cool enough, how about a space colony in low Earth orbit? A lot more difficult and expensive than an Earth-based colony, but much, much, much cheaper and easier to build than something on Mars. And almost as cool, right? Here's all the advantages of an orbiting city over a Martian city. Kind of makes you want to be a spaceman, right? Okay, so what about asteroid collision? An asteroid could definitely wipe out the human race. But, I mean, extinction level asteroids are very, very rare. It's been 65 million years since the last asteroid hit that would have killed off all human life. Those kind of odds are really not something we should worry about at all, especially when we're already facing much larger, more immediate threats. And yes, there are much higher chances of smaller asteroid hits, which could do a lot of damage. But asteroids hit Mars just like they hit Earth, so you're not reducing the chance of death by asteroid by going to Mars. But let's say you're still worried about that big asteroid. Think about this. That dinosaur-killing asteroid that wiped out 99.9% of animals on the planet and reduced the Earth to a cloud-covered, dark, burning hellscape. But even when Earth was at its lowest point, when the planet was the least hospitable it had been in the last 500 million years, it was still far, far, far more hospitable than Mars on its best day. Even the day after the worst-case asteroid hit, you're still better off on Earth. Mars is just never gonna be a good option. Mars is still just a barren, lifeless rock. In fact, an Earth-orbiting space colony is the best option here, since it would represent a vanishingly tiny target for an asteroid, unlike on Mars and Earth, where a hit anywhere on the planet could represent a real danger to any surface-based colony. The final risk is that we kill ourselves in a war. I don't know how to measure the risk of this actually happening, but if we do get very genocidal, then anything on Earth's surface, and maybe even in Earth's orbit, could potentially be at risk. And a colony as far away as Mars might actually be too far away to prioritize as a target. So I guess this is a small window of utility for a Mars colony. But still, living on Mars will represent such a dramatic set of challenges that at the point that a Mars colony is truly practical and sensible, we'd probably have either solved most of the problems we face here or have long since wiped ourselves out. The ultimate and boring reality is that Earth is likely the best home we'll ever have. And I suspect for the next 2 centuries, which is as long as anyone should realistically try to project into the future, our fate is tied to this planet, for better or for worse.